Hi, all. Welcome to the Riot Lunch and Learn series, the place where we spotlight Riot's sponsors and partners. My name is Natalie Ballard. I'm the Events and Operations Manager for Riot. Just a couple quick reminders before we get started. This event is being recorded and will be posted to Riot's YouTube channel and uploaded to the meetup page where you registered for this event. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please place them in the chat. We will be monitoring the chat and we'll read the questions aloud throughout the presentation. Questions are read aloud for those watching the presentation at a later date. Finally, please keep yourself muted throughout the event to help mitigate background noise. Today, we have Kyle Linton from Lithios to discuss how to build smart city apps to engage citizens. Kyle, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Natalie. Hope everybody's having a really good day today. We put together some slides to talk about this topic and go into more depth. But I would certainly encourage folks to ask questions throughout the presentation, and then we're going to make some time at the end as well. And I'm trying to get all my windows organized so I can hopefully see the chat here, because some stuff maneuvered around here. Okay, I've got it pulled up on the side here. So please feel free to ask questions in the chat, and I'll try to respond to them as quickly as I can, as I sort of reference between different monitors. But really, the focus of today's session is how to build smart city apps to engage citizens. So just to kind of give you a little bit of context on myself. So I've been working in the software development space for over 8 years. I've worked in a wide variety of different companies. I've started companies on my own, and currently I've managed about 40 different product engagements for Lithios between discovery, design, and development. So I've got a lot of experience sort of building different technologies and working with our team at Lithios to do just that for a variety of different industries. And a little bit of background information just for context on Lithios. So we're a local software development firm, originally started out of NC State by an individual named Deshaun Brown, who owns the organization. And some of y'all may know Deshaun through the local network. We've got a lot of experience doing UI, UX research and design. And then we build applications, web and mobile applications with a variety of different types of companies. And we're typically building in React, React Native, native Android and iOS, and then some different web platforms. A huge sort of, I think, plus of our organization is we really focus on integrated design and development. We think it's really important that we spend a lot of time doing research and understanding the user's problem, and so that we can develop the best solution. And getting research and doing other things to sort of inform that solution is something that's really important in our process. So we oftentimes will have an individual that will come to us or an organization from the very beginning and say, oh, well, conceptually, we'd like to do this. And then we'll help them all the way from the beginning, the initial sort of ideation, the scoping of what they're trying to build, and then transition into the design phase where we're creating the sort of look and feel and creating component libraries for sort of future versions. And then we'll transition eventually into development where we're building and expanding and improving and offering support for as these products scale. We've got a lot of different domain expertise areas, a lot of different folks that we've worked with, which has given us just a huge depth of knowledge and the ability to move quickly and understand problems quickly and how to solve them in the sort of technology space. So the last thing I'll sort of share is, we've worked on a lot of different client engagements that, has certainly impacted the presentation for today. So we've worked on very much consumer-facing applications like DraftKings, more enterprise applications like Free that had some embedded sensors and technology. We've done some healthcare work with some other partners. And then specifically, I'll highlight a few of our partners a little bit later on in sort of case studies, showing some of the work that we're doing in the smart city space specifically. But I think that the general takeaway is that through a lot of these different client engagements, we've been able to learn lots of little bits and pieces in different ways about how to best integrate with sensors, how to best engage with consumers, how to do gamification, some of these different pieces. Most of that just has to be applied to the individual organization that we're working with, which we'll get into more depth on. So really getting into the meat of this presentation and where we'd like to go is I think that a lot of the work that we do with smart cities starts with a question. And that question is like, what is your city or municipality trying to accomplish by building an application? Because as you all know, software is so widespread and has a lot of different functions for a variety of different organizations. And a lot of people say that if you're not a software business, every business is becoming a software business in some capacity, whether it's to run the sort of core operations and you're leveraging software tools, or whether it's to sort of reach a broader audience. These software tools are becoming more and more commonplace in everything that we do. I think myself alone, I've got over 400 logins to different software, platforms that are stored within my password manager just to sort of live and function in daily life. And so specifically for cities, then, I think that there's a real opportunity to create various software solutions that solve different problems for different groups or different needs. And so if I were to sort of put myself in a city's shoes, the first question I'd be asking is, okay, if I want to develop software, what is the purpose of developing that software? And so some of the different examples of what that could be are sort of outlined here, showcasing what amenities the city has to offer, increasing citizen engagement, improving the way and simplifying the way that citizens pay bills and track sort of metrics around their usage, integrating public transport tools, educating citizens about other offerings. And there's a wide variety of other areas that I think that there are potential benefits. And oftentimes what we're seeing is cities are working with different vendors to do different things, but that isn't always integrated into sort of a seamless experience. And so I think that there's opportunities to not only work with sort of off-the-shelf software products, but also to think about a better user experience for the end citizens and sort of bringing that all together to support them. And so I really think that the work that you're doing as a smart city all comes down to the point of what you're trying to accomplish, right? So if you're trying to, I think it's important as a city to sort of say, okay, this is our goal. We want to focus on utilities. We want to streamline the utility payment experience. That's one very unique use case compared to we want to drive engagement and do more grassroots, boots on the ground sort of engagement with our citizens. And so I think just to start the conversation, and the way we start a lot of our conversations with clients, whether they're a smart city or otherwise, is sort of at the top of this funnel, as I would describe it, where let's gather as much information as we can. Let's challenge as many of our assumptions as possible. So, whenever any one of us is developing a software solution, or a product or a new idea, we're always making assumptions about our end users. And it's important that we find ways to validate those assumptions as real problems and then build a software solution around that. So starting at the top of this funnel with this sort of broad discovery process where we get all these ideas and we try to figure out the scope is certainly the first and most important step. Whereas then over time, that process will be like, okay, let's build out these pieces, they'll solve these problems, and then let's expand in these areas in the future. So starting with sort of the initial point and then funneling down is critical in this process. But let's talk a little bit more about what some of the benefits of building some smart city applications could be for your city or municipality. So really, utilizing technology like sensors or data analysis to make life easier for citizens is certainly an opportunity. We've worked with different vendors that I'll talk about in a little bit. And one of our partners is actually on the call today, Rick. And we'll talk about some of the opportunities to integrate sensors for, stormwater drainage, or for, integrating sensors for field availability status. Cross-departmentally in cities and municipalities, there's a lot of opportunities to sort of leverage sensor data, integrate it within a broader product solution. And then the optimization of services is also critical. So transportation, energy, waste management, public safety, I think that there's a direct opportunity to make cities more sustainable and to sort of present that publicly and be really on the cutting edge of sort of smart city technology. But ultimately, I think another sort of direct benefit of creating a smart city app is improving the quality of life for citizens and residents, and making them feel that they're part of community, that they are, engaging, with a city or municipality that has their best interests in mind and cares about, sustainability efforts and everything else. And I think that's the largest perk of building these sort of potential applications. So a few other ways that it can benefit a smart city, improving urban mobility and public safety with maps, emergency reporting. You'll see on here, and we'll get a little bit more in the weeds later on with these specific applications, but we're working with Town of Morrisville right now to release an application that does some of these things. And then on the right, you'll see the city of Wilson that we've worked with on a utility management platform. So there's, the ability to integrate, not only the urban mobility, public safety, but then increasing citizen engagement with things like easy bookings, events, public transportation, and then allowing individuals in the city that have businesses or sort of personal relationships with the city to then build potential profiles, customize their online presence, have that be accessible within a city or municipality, and then some of the utility stuff that we've talked about. So really, I think the purpose of these slides is to sort of showcase these different examples and these different mechanisms for which you can build software around, these different problems that need to be solved. There are so many other problems that I'm sure that we simply just haven't spent as much time and focus on, but really, I think the initial concept of finding a problem within your city and, trying to create a software solution around it, if that makes sense, is really what we're trying to get at here. So, with all these different potential business applications, to support smart cities, I'd like to talk a little bit about the challenges associated with building these kinds of applications. It's certainly not all sunshine and rainbows. We've run into some of these challenges with some of our partners, and we've had to sort of collaboratively work through these different pieces. The first one I'll talk about that I hit on a little bit earlier is technical integrations. So cities oftentimes work with a variety of different vendors for a variety of different services. And this could include payment processing, collection of sensor data, a variety of other or entire backends, notification systems. There's a wide variety of different pieces to this. And we have, certainly run into challenges with some of these vendors where they may not have an open API, or their documentation may be not what we need. Or, in one example, a payment processor that the city was working with informed the city that they couldn't take ACH payments without more complication. So there is oftentimes we have to sort of work in a partnership capacity with these different cities to work around these technical constraints, to talk with the vendors to figure out mechanisms that we can create the best user experience. And sometimes there are certainly just constraints with these different vendors that we're working with that, we've got to try to do the best we can to work around, or just build a new system for, a new API or something for a particular issue. Second, I would say that obviously security and privacy are a huge deal for cities and municipalities, making sure that we're storing personal data safely and securely if we're even collecting it in the first place, especially since the users are within a specified geographic region. But on top of that, we have to build in certain practices into our technology development, where, for example, something as simple as a login, that we are making sure that users that log into a platform have to have a certain level of protections with their passwords. In certain cases, we have multi-factor authentication. We're thinking about encryption in transit and in rest. So we've really got to think of all the different pieces that ensure that we're creating a safe and secure experience for citizens. And then I think another category that oftentimes does come up with cities is really the functionality versus resourcing discussion. We don't want to create mobile and web applications that are simply just another version of the website as an app, especially since the user will have to download the app before they're even accessing those resources. So having sort of conversations and saying, okay, well, how do we ensure that we're building functionality into this experience first and foremost, but informational resources, and finding smarter ways to provide informational resources as we're developing these applications. So there's oftentimes a natural push and pull conversation to say, okay, how do we focus on creating something that's the most valuable for users, leaning into sort of building functionality, but also having resources when needed. And then I think that just a natural, challenge that comes with any software development is scope creep. There can be so many layers of complication for a variety of different features. So it's really important that we're able to have these structured conversations with different cities and say, okay, here are the constraints of taking this approach or that approach. Here are the pros and cons. Ultimately, we have to make some decisions in the process of doing software development. And we want to work with our partners so that we're not handing anybody a surprise bill or the timelines get out of whack. Doesn't mean that it won't happen, but we really try to create this hand-in-hand relationship with partners to try to avoid, additional scope creep and nickel and diming folks. And there's a variety of other challenges, but I think that those are some of the main ones that I would sort of flag for today. A second sort of category that I would want to talk about a little bit in the development of smart city applications is really thinking through the different technical options that you can take when it comes to developing a mobile or web experience. So there's a lot of different directions, and I'm sure y'all are familiar with a lot of these, different sort of languages and focus areas. So, for us, we build applications in React Native and then native applications as well for mobile. And for web, we're normally building in React. But some of these different trade-offs, some of these different platforms have different trade-offs. If we're handing this over to a city eventually for them to manage, and say, we're building it in React, we need to make sure that that city is prepared in the future when we hand things over to be able to support that and to hire developers that can support that particular language or framework. So, we end up having a lot of these conversations early in that discovery and design phase to say, how do we make sure that the platform that we're building this on is standardized, has a lot of documentation, but also more importantly, that we're going to be able to support this long term, whether it's through a relationship with us or you're building out your own team and we're helping train that team in this language where there's going to be acceptable or a reasonable amount of developers that you can hire. And then there's other, sort of technical questions that we have to ask. Not only the additional service providers that cities are oftentimes working with and we're integrating with, but also are there preferences towards, leveraging Amazon Web Services or Azure or Heroku? I think really trying to get a deeper understanding with our partners of what's going to be most valuable to them. Do they have credits in one area or another that are free? And so are we leaning into one platform? These are the sort of questions that come up as well. And then some of these other, things we want to make sure we put in place with these engagements are really making sure we're creating robust analytics to be able to track usage and behavior, and whether that's integrating with the web or with marketing campaigns, seeing sort of uptick in traffic as users, sort of download the application, or whether it's getting into more granular sort of user experience tweaks where we go, okay, this feature is working well, this one people aren't accessing or don't care about. So, sort of pivoting the direction in different versions that, we build in the future. So what I'd like to do now is, as I provided this sort of broad overview of the different sort of reasons that you might want to consider building a smart city application, the different challenges associated with building a smart city application, the different sort of technical stacks. Now I'd like to just get into some very specific case studies here about some different applications we've worked on and talk just a little bit about, at a high level, of some of the different decisions and thinking that we've made in the process of working on these engagements. So the first case study I'll present is the city of Wilson. So we've been working with Wilson on their citizen portal, which is a custom web application that was really meant to aggregate utility services and payment into one simplified platform. And Wilson is certainly unique because, as I'm sure a lot of us are familiar, in paying for different services with different providers, whether it's AT&T or City of Raleigh or whatever else, Wilson's pretty unique in that a lot of their services are actually managed in-house. So Wilson has their own internet service, electric, water. So they've got sort of they're very unique in the nation and have won awards for some of their sort of integrated utility services that they have. So really what we started with them discussing is, how do we build the best possible experience for a utility platform for people to see their things over time, and then most importantly to make payments, which is a complicated beast on its own, as it involves potentially scheduled payments and auto pay and sort of leveling out payments for folks that are more budget conscious. So there's a lot of smaller, more integral and complex pieces to that experience that we've had to work through with them. And so just to get a little bit more into this particular platform, we also had to think about different user types. And this is something that is really important in the process of developing an application, that you're thinking not only of the end user that you're trying to solve the problem for, in Wilson's case, paying utilities, but you're also thinking about the administrative side, right? So for Wilson, they need somebody on the back end on their platform with a different user type that's able to manage everything and change payments and adjust things for users that are emitting payments, because inevitably there's always going to be some adjustments that need to be made with users, and users call in and need to support tickets. So thinking about these different user types in the scope of the broader platform is really critical. And for most platforms, I think that looks like you've got your super admin user that can control everything on the back end. You've got your your standard admin who's permissioned by the super admin that has maybe slightly less permissions, and then you've got your end user that's supporting. So you've got all these different various user types that have to be considered. That's just for them. There are for other platforms and products we worked on, there has been 5 or 6 or 7 different user types that we've had to consider. So every product is just a little bit different in that regard. But thinking about that sort of holistically from the beginning is important to understand, okay, well, if end user submits something here, then this user's got to be able to respond to it. So you've got to really think about this stuff from the beginning and create complex flows to figure out how all the information flows together. But just to run through some of the bullet points of this product, we really, with this product, are facilitating utility management for Wilson citizens. We're streamlining offerings, so we're showing different packages that users can select for internet, water, electricity, etc. You can remove those utility services, and that feeds into the back end. And then we're tracking a lot of analytics behind those different products. And so all in all, this sort of combined experience that we've built for them is a cohesive utility management experience. We've really tried to make it as user-friendly as possible to create the logical flows through the application that are the most simple. It allows citizens to be able to view, edit their utility services, pay and schedule payments, manage utilities, and then, like I mentioned before, super admins are able to manage that entire process. So that's sort of a brief descriptor of City of Wilson, which is a project we've been working on for a little while. I'm sure that'll sort of evolve into a variety of potential future versions where we're integrating messaging and we're building out the support infrastructure and the integration so that we can streamline the process for their team to respond to certain incidents. But that's sort of a brief synopsis of that particular project and some of the different pieces we've had to consider. So transitioning now into the work we're doing with the town of Morrisville, sort of at a very high level. Town of Morrisville is an app it's an award-winning app. We've been working with those folks for a little while now, and are actually about to be in the process of fully deploying that application within the next few days. So if you live in Morrisville, download the app as soon as the team gives you the green light. But really the purpose of this goal was to connect Morrisville residents, business owners, visitors with different events that were happening in the community. It allows users to stay up to date with what's going on, whether that is road closures, shuttle services, events, all within one simplified user interface. And so we developed this application really to just enrich the lives of users within Morrisville and drive engagement and create sort of a direct channel of communication with the city that is sort of close and beneficial for everyone that lives there. So, just a few of the sort of getting into more of the specifics, really our goal was to connect residents, with where they live, provide real-time updates. And so we've done some integration work with their sort of notification system to be able to push updates out from the city, have the users receive those. And this has required some more complicated integration work with some of the back-end providers that they have, which always come with its challenges, but also benefits that are streamlined. But then there's also some mapping functionality built within that application that allows Morrisville residents to get around town, see what's going on, see events, sort of take a bigger part in their community with things that are coming up. And really then, sort of as I mentioned earlier, we also wanted this application to be a hub for resources for folks in the community. So to be able to access more resources more simply on the go, as opposed to just going to the website and having to sort of navigate a bunch of different pieces of content. So trying to pull to the top the most, accessible resources that we think people are going to be accessing, really I think is critical for residents. So here's a few sort of screenshots of what this looks like. On the left, you can see some of the different events going on in the town. Obviously ignore the Latin text, but that's filler for some of the individual events. And then on the right, we've got a couple things integrated within this. At the top, we created this custom functionality that allows users to filter the map based on events, meetings, shuttle stops, incidents, facilities, and activities. But then, as they select those things, those are the only sort of things that show up on the map, so people can kind of customize their experience and only see what they want to see. But then on top of this, I think it's really important that this sort of map view, the team came to us and said, these are things that are critical for us moving forward, is being able to book a shuttle, with sort of an integrated shuttle system that the city has or the town has, but also being able to report an incident, road closures, power line issues, different things that sort of come up that citizens need to be able to sort of report, and the town can respond to in real time, which shows a level of further engagement. So really, I think the last thing I'll sort of highlight here is that this application is a great example of a lot of different things coming together and different opportunities to engage the town further. I think another concept that we've worked on with them is a town mural project where, at a predetermined amount of time, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, the town can actually host a digital art competition where they put out a call for artwork. They can receive artwork, and then they can display the winner of that campaign in the application. So we've tried to think through it and say, are there more creative ways that we can engage citizens and create a more fun experience with the individuals of the town? I think driving that sort of engagement and thinking through those nuanced ideas, whether that's scavenger hunts or gamification, these are some of the other things that we've been thinking about of how do we bring people back into the application, get them engaged within this community, while also giving them access to the resources that are most beneficial to them. So I think there's a real opportunity to expand upon the work that we've done in some of these areas, just depending on sort of the what is the top priority based on what citizens are looking for. And we've been really sort of lucky with our partners at Town of Morrisville, who've been really forward thinking. They pulled us also into meetings with members in the town, where we've been able to have some of these conversations about what sort of features do we want to prioritize? What do we think of certain concepts, where we've come to the table and brought, UI samples and say, what do you think of this idea or this idea? To help steer the ship where, really we understand how to build technology, but the town understands how to engage with citizens and think through sort of what are ways that the citizens might want to better engage with the town. So that sort of marriage of where we can bring in domain expertise and sort of guide that experience, if it's a feature around gamification or chat bots or whatever else, we can guide an experience, but the town is really telling us, oh, this is what we want the most based on what our citizens like. So that's, it's been a very successful sort of marriage in that regard. And that's really what we're looking for is a partnership, is we want to be an extension of town or city or municipality, because that's what's needed in order to build the best technology. So I'm getting close to wrapping up here, but sort of the last thing that I'll sort of share is, I think that there's a lot of other features and functionalities that we can consider, for a town or city application. We can, build in more custom walkthroughs and onboarding for more easy user adoption. So, we've all used applications where you answer 5 or 10 questions at the beginning of the application, and then the whole app is centered around just what you're looking for. I think that this gives the best user experience, and there's ways to make this more and more robust over time. So this is certainly sort of a specific feature that we can do. But then there's also something like a dice roll where you can do more fun and gamey type things where maybe there's a list of amenities and somebody can hit a dice button and then it'll show you one particular amenity and say, oh, well, there's an event coming up that meets your preferences, you should go to this one. So that's another feature. But then we've also had a lot more conversations around, okay, well, can we integrate with a chatbot? Can we try to facilitate a modality of conversation with the city? And this can look like a lot of different things. This can be sort of you can say, hey, what events are going on in my city in the next week? Or, what is there a field that is available at, XYZ location? I think that there's a lot of different potential benefits to sort of integrating that sort of technology. A lot of it just depends on the constraints of the chatbot system, the way that chatbot system is taught, and the sort of complexity of it. But I hope this just sparks a few ideas of other potential mechanisms that you can sort of create an application around or expand the functionality and engagement, within your city or municipality. So really, that's what I've got for today. I wanted to sort of keep this short and sweet and leave the floor open for some conversation. I hope this sparks some ideas and gives some case studies for some of the work that we've done to this point. I think that this is some of these areas I don't think are particularly new, building utility platforms, but I think the user experience and making those smarter and more simple, I think is something that is newer, where we can really layer in strong UI and UX work into making this experience as fun, easy as possible for citizens. And one sort of final example that I'll give that I can't take credit for that we worked on, but one of honestly the best experiences that I've seen recently for a smart city application is I guess it's more of a regional application, is the DMV system, where you can re-register your vehicle and sort of put you through this very specific chatbot flow. But it's surprisingly simple and intuitive, and I believe that's offered by a third-party vendor. But you can sort of see how embedding these different tools in different areas of smart cities or engaging with citizens can be incredibly impactful and streamlined. And everyone, I think, sometimes thinks of cities and governments as being slow and lethargic, but there's mechanisms to make it not that way, and to build in good design and to engage with citizens in a way that we've never had the opportunity to before. So we're happy to sort of discuss this further, whether it's just giving advice or working more closely together. We're always open to a conversation, and wanted to sort of give everybody the floor to ask me any questions that you have. And yeah, ultimately just appreciate the time.
That's awesome, Kyle. Thanks so much. We'll leave the chat box open for some questions, if you guys want to drop them in there. In the meantime, as a reminder, Riot hosts Lunch and Learns weekly on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find a list of our Lunch and Learns on Meetup, where you registered for this event. This event was recorded and will be posted to Riot's YouTube channel and the Meetup page where you registered for this event. I see one question coming in. Does city have programs to fund the app development?
Yeah, good question. I am not, an employee of a city or municipality, so I can't speak to all the intricacies of sort of the budget side of that. But yes, I do think that oftentimes cities have their own funding mechanisms to support this sort of work. I think it depends a little bit on the business application, but then some cities also pursue that we've worked with or talked with in the past, pursue grant funding, and as a cutout of that grant funding, are able to work on this sort of forward-thinking software work. And if anybody else is in the call and has more insights into this, obviously I'm not the best person to answer this, but please feel free to contribute.
Here's another question. How do you decide which platform or framework to develop on, React Native versus native mobile?
Great question. Yeah, really great question. This is something that we have to deal with and think about for applications that are not just smart city applications, but others as well. I think that the landscape has changed a little bit. If we're talking specifically like React Native versus native, I would say so. React Native is, well, it's technically two code. It's the purpose is you're building in a single code base and then you're porting it out to Android and iOS, which you can then add native modules on top of. So I think that the difference between sort of native and React Native is not nearly what it used to be, but normally our sort of decision point for if we're going native or React Native, well, ideally we try to go React Native because it can save our customers money, right? Single code base, we can kind of focus on that. I think the resourcing is good. There's a wealth of developers that work in that space, as opposed to having to build individually custom two different platforms at the same time, two different code bases that are leveraging the same design library. A lot of time, fundamentally, the decision comes down to the features and functionality of the application. So to give you an example of this, excuse me, we have done a lot of advanced like Bluetooth work. So Bluetooth work, camera work, where we're having to leverage sort of at a deep level the direct operating system and hardware of the device. And a native application is better suited to do that. So if we're doing a lot of, sort of working with another device, a smart device, or if we're having to build a custom sort of camera, for example, that is oftentimes when we will go native. But these days, the majority of applications can be built in React Native sort of safely. And we've even built Bluetooth applications in React Native in the past. I just think that some of that more intensive hardware operating system stuff is better on a native, platform. Other questions? One other small point I'll make on that as well is I think that we oftentimes do end up having conversations with our partners around, our smart city partners around, does this need to be a web first mobile experience or does this need to be a mobile first experience? And if it's a mobile first experience, then it makes a lot of sense to develop an application. But oftentimes, for example, for City of Wilson, that needed to be a web first experience that was mobile responsive. So, people needed to be able to access it on web. They didn't necessarily need to download an application to get to it, but they needed to be able to, pay and do what they need to do from their phone. So we do, in the early phases of discovery and design, oftentimes have conversations around where do you anticipate most of your users using this? What are the sort of functionalities you want that would dictate what kind of experience it needs to be? And what are the other factors we need to think about when it comes to sort of the technology stack around this? So I hope that was sort of an offhanded remark, but I hope that gives a little clarity there as well. Awesome. Any other questions, y'all?
That's all I'm seeing for now. Thanks so much, Kyle. This was great. I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Appreciate the time. Have a good one.
Oh, here's one more.
Oh, one more.
Yeah. Do you see this focus more on employment retention as well?
Good question. Let's see if I can figure out how best to answer that. Definitely. I mean, I think that we built a variety of software tools that make lives easier of like different partners that we work with, clients in particular. So, if we're able to, for example, work with, City of Wilson and give them a better backend and a better set of software to manage sort of support tickets and other pieces and streamline their work so that they can think about more forward thinking and proactive things. I think that there's an opportunity to do that. And so that's sort of a direct example of how a platform can augment work of employees. But I guess more specifically, we have built like platforms and software around employee retention, in a variety of different use cases. I think we just have to get into sort of a specific conversation about what you're, trying to accomplish.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's all for now. Thank you all. Thank you all for joining today.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.